Hello and welcome. Let's discuss today endocrine system. So let's discuss endocrine system. Now when we go through and we discuss endocrine system, very good, not a centric ring system. So here when we go through and we discuss endocrine system, this is covering chapter 18 in this book here. Now when we go through and we talk introduction to the endocrine system, first here let's go through and let's talk a couple of terms that I'd like you to be familiar with. Then the first term here is endocrinology. Now when we go through and we talk endocrinology, endocrinology is going to be the study of hormones. It will be the study of hormones and endocrine organs. So it's the study of hormones and endocrine organs. Now, when we go through and we talk function of this endocrine system, we'll see the function of this endocrine system is to influence the metabolic activity. It is to influence the metabolic activity of the body via hormones. It's to influence the metabolic activity of the body by means of hormones, via hormones. Next is the method of control. How does this endocrine system control the metabolism? It does this via the endocrine glands, one of those components. And we talk endocrine glands, I'd like you to know endocrine glands are ductless glands. Endocrine glands are ductless glands. Endocrine glands produce hormones. They produce hormones. And they release these hormones that they produce into the surrounding tissue fluid. So endocrine glands will secrete hormones into the surrounding tissue fluid. From there, it'll make its way, the hormone well, into the bloodstream and travel to wherever it needs to go. I keep using the term hormones. You must be thinking, what is this thing he keeps mentioning? Hormones. Hormones are going to be chemical substances. They are chemical substances. You can think of them as chemical messengers that are secreted into the bloodstream. So chemical messengers, chemical substances that are secreted by certain cells, into, we said, the surrounding tissue, and eventually making their way into the bloodstream, or even the lymph, to travel to distant regions. So chemical substances that are secreted by certain cells into the surrounding tissue, eventually making their way into the blood or the lymph. Most commonly, blood is what we'll check out and we'll talk. To travel to distant organs to influence the metabolic function of other cells in the body. We compare and we contrast endocrine organs and endocrine glands to exocrine glands. Now, when we talk exocrine glands, we have talked about exocrine glands before, and so you make sure you've got the difference down now between exocrine glands and endocrine glands, right? We said first they're ductless when we talk endocrine glands, and they secrete internally. We saw the exact opposite with exocrine glands. Now, when we go through and we talk endocrine system, endocrine glands, endocrine organs, this system is going to be compared to the nervous system. The reason why these two systems are compared to one another is because endocrine system, when it elicits an effect, well, first of all, the reason why they're compared is because they both control other systems, right? Nervous system controls, we've seen muscular system, Okay, here you can see this endocrine system is going to control a lot of other activities in the body. So, number one, endocrine system's effects tend to be slower, and they are more sustained compared to nervous system. Right, nervous system, look how fast those reactions are, and they're not as sustained. Now, endocrine messengers, they can affect a wider variety of more distant organs. Right, there we had just our effector organs we described. Now, these two systems, not only are they compared to one another, but they also coordinate responses. And when they coordinate responses, this helps to, again, keep the body in homeostasis. Now, we have some cells in the body that are going to be referred to as neuroendocrine cells. The reason why is because they're going to have dual function. Not only are they going to be functioning for the nervous system, doing their tasks there, but they're also going to have a job here when it comes to endocrine system as well. So neuroendocrine cells, which make up neuroendocrine organs, we can say there as well. And we'll see a lot of organs are going to have dual function. Here we're saying neuro. Okay, the stomach is going to be releasing hormones and also has another job. Same thing with the gonads. Same thing with the thymus. Same thing with lots of other organs we'll go through and we'll check out and we'll see here when it comes to the endocrine system. So when we talk means of travel, how do hormones travel? We said hormones are going to travel through the bloodstream. They will travel through the bloodstream. Now we talk target cells. Now when we talk target cells are going to be the cells on which these hormones elicit their effect. They're the cells on which these hormones will elicit their effects. The target cells are capable of responding to hormones because they bear receptors for the hormone. It's like saying we all have keys. However, my key doesn't open your locks. Your keys don't open my locks. Or we have garage door openers, right? Or even key fobs, right? We all have them. However, they're all doing different tasks. So target cells are going to be the cells on which the hormones will elicit their effects. So the hormone can't just go and elicit an effect on any and every single cell, right? Same thing with your key. Just because you have a key, you can't say, "Oh, I'm just going to go and open up, my neighbor's door and I'm going to go inside their house." Well, you have a key. However, is that key the right key that's required to open up that lock? So the same thing here when it comes to hormones. You can't say, "Oh, growth hormone is going to make its way over to where thyroid stimulating hormone works and it'll just cause an effect of what TSH was supposed to be doing." That's not how it goes. Okay, so there's target cells there. You got to make sure you remember that. Now, the speed of control, very important here. When we talk speed of control, we'll see when we go through, we classify our hormones. Our hormones are going to get classified into two main categories. They'll be classified into being either water-soluble hormones or into being lipid-soluble hormones. So when we talk speed of control, you'll see some hormones have the ability to provoke target organ responses almost immediately. Others, like steroid hormones, they require hours or even days sometimes to elicit their effects. The water-soluble hormones are going to work a little bit faster. So we talk speed of control. That will all depend on which hormone we're talking about. Here you can appreciate all the organs that make up this endocrine gland, that make up the endocrine system. So they're all endocrine glands. Now this system is also a little bit different compared to other systems. This system, you see the organs, they're all spread around everywhere throughout the body. When we talk gastrointestinal, we'll see they're going to be confined to a certain area. You're not going to find those components in different parts. So same thing, reproductive, you're going to find in just one area. Okay, so you can see how everything is going to get classified into their specific regions. But with endocrine system, you see these organs are going to be found scattered over the entire body. Now, when we go through and we talk about endocrine organs, here you can see various organs. Here they're showing us the pineal gland. When we zoom in on this area here we can appreciate the hypothalamus, and we have the pituitary gland. And then down here we have the thyroid gland, and on the dorsal aspect of the thyroid gland, you can appreciate the parathyroid glands there. And then down here you can appreciate a few glands we're going to get into, and then moving down to the gonads. Male testes, females, we're talking ovaries when we use the term gonads. So that's why they're depicting both here. All a part of endocrine system because they also have endocrine functions there as well. Very good. Next in here, you can see all of these various organs again. Nice picture here depicting to us all the various organs. So like we mentioned, some of these organs are going to be pure endocrine organs, while others are going to have dual functions. So here you can see some of them as well. So here, let's go through and actually let's talk about each of these endocrine glands then. Now when we go through and we talk each endocrine gland, the first gland I'd like you to know about and I'd like to mention is going to be our pituitary gland. Now this pituitary gland is also known as the hypophysis, aka hypophysis. It's a very tiny gland. It secretes about 9 hormones we're going to go through and we're going to check out. It will secrete 9 hormones we're going to go through and we're going to check out. This gland is going to get divided up into 2 lobes. So it's considered to be bilobed. It's considered bilobed. Now let's talk location. Location, you'll see it's securely seated. This gland is securely seated in the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. In the sella turcica of the sphenoid bone. Now, when we go through, we said we divide this gland up into 2 lobes. That's one way we could see there, but we'll move ahead and we'll see kind of how that happens further as well. This slide here is depicting to you how your steroid hormones will function. The reason why they take a little bit longer to function is because their receptors are found located inside the cell. So here you can see that hormone actually has to penetrate the cell, make its way into the cell, and then look for that receptor and bind to the receptor. And when you have that receptor and hormone bound to one another, you form this receptor hormone complex. So here then you can see that receptor hormone complex makes its way into the cell and can even initiate protein synthesis as we see taking place right inside of here. So if we're talking water soluble, their receptors are going to be found located right on the membrane. So here, they're inside of the cell when it comes to lipid soluble hormones. Very important you understand that too. So here we can see that pituitary gland, 2 divisions we've got there. Now here when we go through and we check out the 2 divisions, here we can appreciate both of them there very nicely. So here we can see how this gland is divided up into 2 different lobes. And as we continue forward, we'll be able to appreciate the same thing through these images here as well. So here you can see they're depicting the anterior and the posterior. Let's go through and let's check out first. Let's do the anterior pituitary. Let's do the anterior pituitary. Now we talk the anterior pituitary gland. The pituitary gland in itself, I told you, is going to be known as the hypophysis. The hypophysis. So let's talk anterior pituitary. Now we talk anterior pituitary gland. The anterior pituitary gland, we are talking now about what we refer to as the adenohypophysis. The adenohypophysis. When we talk adenohypophysis, the adenohypophysis or the anterior pituitary gland is composed of glandular tissue. It is composed of glandular tissue. And this gland, the adenohypophysis, it's going to manufacture and it's going to release a number of hormones. We're going to go through each and every one of them and we'll check them all out. This gland is under the control of the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is going to be responsible for releasing, and inhibiting hormones. So here, when these releasing or inhibiting hormones are going to be released into the bloodstream, they're going to make their way over to the anterior pituitary to where they can either stimulate or they're going to inhibit those hormones from being secreted. So it's important you understand each and every hypothalamic hormone that you have there and how it will control the anterior pituitary. So first hormone we're going to talk about is going to be growth hormone. We talk about growth hormone. Growth hormone is also abbreviated GH. Growth hormone is produced by the cells that are called the somatotrophs. So growth hormone is produced by the somatotrophs of the anterior pituitary. The target organs, you'll see the major targets are going to be the bone and skeletal muscle. Will be the bone and skeletal muscle. These are the major organs, like I said. However, we're going to see they can affect, this hormone can affect a lot of different organs as well. We'll go through and we'll check all that out. The function now, the function of growth hormone is to stimulate your body's cells to increase in size and divide. It stimulates your body's cells to increase in size and divide, growth promoting, and you can say metabolic actions. It's got growth promoting and metabolic actions. So here when we go through and we check out how growth hormone functions, you can see that here very nicely. So you need to understand this thoroughly, and you need to understand how growth hormone gets released by the anterior pituitary in response to growth hormone releasing hormone, which came from the anterior pituitary, which came from the hypothalamus to stimulate the anterior pituitary. And you also have growth hormone inhibiting hormone there as well. So when we talk growth hormone inhibiting a hormone, it's going to do exactly what its name says. It'll inhibit the release of growth hormone. So now when growth hormone is released, growth hormone is going to affect lots of different organs you can see here. Now on our fat and carbohydrates, it's going to have a direct action. It will have a direct action where it will increase fat breakdown and release. With fat, non-carbohydrates, it's involved with carbohydrate metabolism. Here what it does is it's going to increase blood glucose and other anti-insulin effects. Now when we talk liver and other tissues, it's not going to have a direct action like we saw with the indirect actions with growth hormone there. Now here it's going to produce insulin-like growth factors when it makes its way over to certain organs like the liver and other tissues. So it makes its way over to those organs, those tissues, and it knocks on the door basically saying, hey, I'm here. And now what happens is those organs and those tissues are going to produce IGFs, insulin-like growth factors. These IGFs, insulin-like growth factors, now are going to have effects of their own. And here then you can see their effects that you'll be responsible for knowing about there as well. Now too much or too little growth hormone. Too little, we have then what we call pituitary dwarfism. Too much in the child, before the growth plates close, patient can suffer from gigantism. If you have too much growth hormone before growth plates close, gigantism. Here the patient's going to have linear growth. They're usually taller, like NBA players. Now in acromegaly the growth hormone surge occurs after these growth plates have closed. And so there you don't see a linear growth, you have a widening of these various skeletal structures. So these patients will come in complaining of their hat not fitting anymore, their shoes not fitting anymore. And then what you'll do to diagnose it is you'll ask them for pictures from previous years and try to compare the two and look at, and they're usually in their late, maybe 40s, 50s, even 30s. And so you'll compare, the different decades and try to understand what you have going on there. And then there you have a female of normal stature, normal height. Next in here we can move on, and here we're going to be able to see our next hormone. Our next hormone is thyroid stimulating hormone, TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone. TSH, also known as thyrotropin, So here we've got TSH under the control of TRH coming from the hypothalamus. You've got right inside of there. Thyrotropin releasing hormone. Very good. So we talk TSH, also known as thyrotropin. Thyrotropin. Now, target organs. Now, TSH is going to target our thyrotropes. It will target the thyrotropes of our thyroid gland. It will target the thyrotropes of our thyroid gland. All right, so coming back here. So TRH, okay, let's clarify this. TRH is going to make its way from the hypothalamus, making its way over to the anterior pituitary. So it's going to stimulate the thyrotropes of the anterior pituitary. It'll stimulate the thyrotropes of the anterior pituitary to release TSH. TSH then is going to make its way over to the thyroid gland. And then we'll see what it does at the level of the thyroid gland. It's going to stimulate the normal secretory activity of the thyroid gland. So thyrotropes are going to be cells of our anterior pituitary. Now when we talk function, the function of TSH, again, is to stimulate the normal development and secretory activity of our thyroid gland. Next then we have ACTH, adrenal corticotropic hormone, ACTH, aka corticotropin. Now ACTH is going to get released in response to CRH, which is coming from the hypothalamus. So CRH makes its way over to the corticotrophs. Stimulates the corticotrophs of the anterior pituitary to release then ACTH. ACTH is going to target the adrenal glands. More specifically speaking, it will target the cortex of the adrenal glands, and even more specifically speaking, we'll see exactly which part of the cortex that it will target when we get to that gland itself. Now, when ACTH makes its way over to the gland, it's going to stimulate the adrenals to release corticosteroid hormone. Stimulates your adrenals to release corticosteroid hormone. Most important corticosteroid that you'll have to know about is going to be cortisol. It will be cortisol. Next then we have our gonadotropins. Now when we talk gonadotropins will include FSH and LH. FSH and LH. FSH stands for follicle stimulating hormone. LH stands for luteinizing hormone. Now, ACTH, we saw there, under the control of CRH. Now, FSH and LH, our gonadotropins, are going to be under this hormone from the hypothalamus known as GnRH, gonadotropin releasing hormone. So we talk gonadotropin releasing hormone. Gonadotropin releasing hormone then is going to be responsible for releasing FSH and LH. Now we talk FSH. FSH, I'd like you to know, it targets the ovaries and the testes. It will target the ovaries and the testes. Its function is to stimulate gamete production. You're talking sperm or you're talking eggs. Next is luteinizing hormone. Luteinizing hormone, its target organs will include the ovaries and the testes. And the function now of luteinizing hormone, its function will start with first in the males. In males, the function is to stimulate our interstitial cells. It functions to stimulate our interstitial cells in our testes so they can produce testosterone. So in males, luteinizing hormone in males is responsible for stimulating So when we go through and we talk about this hormone in males, again, you could see now luteinizing hormone is going to be, again, targeting the ovaries and the testes. And in the males, it's going to be stimulating the interstitial cells of the testes to produce testosterone. Now in females and women, it will trigger ovulation. And it's going to help the ovarian follicles to mature. Next hormone we have then is prolactin. And we talk prolactin. You can see prolactin is going to be controlled also by the hypothalamus. Now, prolactin is abbreviated PRL, you could see there. And it's a protein hormone that's structurally similar to growth hormone. And you'll see prolactin is controlled by an inhibiting hormone. And that inhibiting hormone is prolactin inhibiting hormone. You see there from the hypothalamus, PIH, or dopamine, it's also known as. So dopamine is increased. You'll see prolactin levels will be decreased. So it's controlled by an inhibitory hormone, dopamine. And what is the function of prolactin? First, prolactin is going to target the breasts. It will target the secretory tissue of the breast. And its function is to stimulate milk production. So this helps us to then take care of this anterior pituitary. Now here you can appreciate this superior hypophyseal artery here. This is the hypophyseal portal system. Okay, and here's the hypophyseal portal veins. So here you can see these releasing hormones get released into the bloodstream. They take off, make their way into basically the bloodstream and on their way over to the anterior pituitary. So from here then you can see they'll take off like they're showing us into the blood, and from the blood these hormones will go wherever they need to go like we described and elicit their responses there from these target cells. Next, then let's move to the posterior pituitary now. So anterior pituitary we took care of. Posterior pituitary now, we'll move back a couple of slides, is highlighted here. You can see very well now. When we talk about this posterior pituitary, this posterior pituitary is also known as the neurohypophysis. Also known as the neurohypophysis. It's not a true endocrine gland. Basically, it's considered a storage unit, this posterior pituitary. And the reason why is because these hormones are going to be produced in the nuclei, as we mentioned. That's why I told you you'll be responsible for knowing these various nuclei. You can see you got your paraventricular and supraoptic nuclei, and they're going to be responsible for then producing and then releasing these hormones. So here we can see then we've got the axon terminals in that posterior pituitary, and then you can see you've got basically our blood vessels here. Here's the inferior hypophyseal artery, okay, compared to the superior we saw before, and you can see how then those hormones will get released into the bloodstream there. So let's talk neurohypophysis. We talk posterior pituitary. First hormone that we have here is oxytocin. Oxytocin, we talk oxytocin. Oxytocin is going to target the uterus and the breasts. So its target organs are uterus and breasts. Now the function, when we talk about the function you'll see is to stimulate. Oxytocin is responsible for stimulating uterine contractions, and it's involved with milk ejection from the breast. So stimulates uterine contractions. Now here what happens is the uterus, when the baby makes its way into basically the pelvis, and is ready for delivery, as the baby moves positions, this gets that uterus to start to kind of expand, and then this is going to start sending signals to, you can see these nuclei, to release oxytocin. Oxytocin makes its way out, then oxytocin is going to stimulate uterine contractions. So those contractions by the baby moving into the uterus, into this last segment of basically you can see that uterus right before it's going to be making its way out. So when it starts to change positions in there, this will get that uterus to start to contract and start to move, which stimulates oxytocin's release. Oxytocin is going to do what? Cause the uterus to contract. So now when oxytocin gets released, it's going to cause the uterus to contract. When the uterus contracts, it causes oxytocin to be released. When oxytocin gets released, it causes the uterus to contract. And so you can see this is going to continue. This is an example of a positive feedback mechanism. In a positive feedback mechanism, what happens is you can see you have a waterfall type effect of the hormones. So this hormone is going to keep getting released until when? Until the stimulus is no longer there. So that's what happens in positive feedback mechanisms. So now, how do we get rid of the stimulus? When the baby is basically born. When the baby is born, the uterus now is not going to contract. So without it contracting, now we'll see that stimulus for oxytocin's levels to be increased aren't going to be as much as we would have had with the baby causing that oxytocin to be increased. So oxytocin is going to be responsible for milk ejection as well, right? Milk ejection, so you can see the baby is basically born, and what's the first thing the baby's going to want besides the mom or the primary caregiver there? It's going to be milk. Next then, let's move to antidiuretic hormone, ADH. Now when we talk antidiuretic hormone, you'll see antidiuretic hormone will target the kidneys. The target organs are the kidneys. Now here, the function of antidiuretic hormone is to prevent wide swings. It is to prevent wide swings in our water balance. It's to prevent wide swings in our water balance, helping the body to avoid dehydration and or water overload. Helps the body to avoid dehydration and or water overload. Anti-diuretic hormone. So first let's talk the word diuretic. Diuretic is something that causes diuresis. What is diuresis? Diuresis is the removal of basically water from the body in the form of urine. So a diuretic, usually a drug, that is going to help remove water from the body. So here when we talk anti-diuretic, so diuretic, I told you now, anti-diuretic is going to do the opposite. It won't allow fluids to be removed from the body in the form of urine. So it prevents wide swings in water balance, helping the body to avoid dehydration and water overload. Anti-diuretic hormone. Now, I'm just telling you right now here it targets the kidneys, but as we progress, you'll know exactly where in the kidneys it's going to be targeting. Or you could know that now here it's best to kind of go through that and get that taken care of here at this level as well. So ADH will prevent, again, wide swings in our water balance. It helps us to avoid dehydration and water overload. Let's move then from anti-diuretic hormone, let's move on to the thyroid gland. Now, when we talk about the thyroid gland, I'd like you to know that the thyroid gland itself is a butterfly-shaped gland. It is a butterfly-shaped gland. This gland, the thyroid gland, is going to be found located in the anterior neck region. It is found located in the anterior neck region. And when we talk about this thyroid gland, it's basically made up of two lateral lobes. It's made up of two lateral lobes. Let's move over to the picture here. You can see one picture where they're depicting that gland with other hormones being involved. But let's actually move to just that picture in itself. So here we could see very nicely, same thing here very nicely, two lateral masses that are going to be connected by this median tissue. By this median tissue, it's called the isthmus. It is called the isthmus. This median tissue helps to connect the two lateral lobes. Next in here, we've got what we call basically the isthmus. So the isthmus is what we have there. You want to make sure you've got that down there as well. So now here what we could see is we could see that gland in basically the macroscopic view. And we can see that gland then in a microscopic view here off to the side. Now here when we go through and we talk about this thyroid gland is found on the anterior neck, on the trachea, just inferior to the larynx. Just inferior to the larynx. So again, it's going to be found located in the anterior neck area, just inferior to the larynx. Just inferior to the larynx. On the trachea, and you can see that here very well. Here's the larynx, you've got right inside of here, and here you can see so here we can appreciate the thyroid gland, again macro and microscopically. Now here, when we talk about this gland under the microscope, you can appreciate it here very nicely here on the right. And you can see this gland is made up of a whole bunch of different follicles. We've talked about these follicles before in the beginning of the semester when we talked about epithelial tissue. Now here we can appreciate each of these follicles. Now look at these individual follicles are made up from all these different follicular cells. So these are follicle cells that make up the follicle. I mean, I don't know how much easier we could make that there. Now, each of these follicles has this colloid material inside, and that material is coming from these cells. These cells will make that stuff and basically accumulate it right inside of here. So let's go through and let's look at these follicle cells. These follicle cells can be cuboidal or even sometimes squamous in shape. They can be cuboidal to squamous in shape sometimes. These follicle cells are going to be responsible for producing thyroid hormones. Thyroid hormones. So here when we go through, we talk thyroid hormones. These thyroid hormones are secreted by the thyroid follicles. Those hormones are made in the follicle by thyroglobulin and iodine. They're made from thyroglobulin and iodine. Now, when we go through and we'll talk about that whole process there as well, and we'll check out that whole process of hormones being produced. Now, the two thyroid hormones that you have to know about are going to include T3, which stands for triiodothyronine. Triiodothyronine. Next, we have T4. T4 stands for thyroxine. Now, the target organs for thyroid hormones, will include, you'll see, they affect just about every single cell in the body. So when we go through and we talk about thyroid hormones are going to affect just about every cell in the body. Now, what is the function of thyroid hormones? You'll see the function of thyroid hormones is to increase your basal metabolic rate. It's to increase your basal metabolic rate. To increase our basal metabolic rate. And also we'll see here, so increasing basal metabolic rate, body heat production. Thyroid hormone also helps to maintain blood pressure, also involved with helping to maintain blood pressure. And it's responsible, you'll see, for regulating tissue growth. It's responsible for regulating tissue growth. It's responsible for regulating tissue development as well. Now, when we talk skeletal and nervous system, you'll see it's also involved with skeletal and nervous system development and maturation. Thyroid hormone is involved in nervous system, skeletal system development, and maturation. And we'll see thyroid hormone is going to be responsible for reproductive capabilities as well. It's involved with reproductive capabilities. Now here we can appreciate the thyroid gland. And here you can see, again, macroscopically and microscopically. So along with the follicular cells, we have here also C cells, or you can refer to them as para, right? The prefix para means next to parafollicular cells. So the cells next to the follicular cells. Next in here we can appreciate the actual process of thyroid hormone formation. So here in this process of thyroid hormone formation, here you can see, number one, iodide is going to be required. Without iodide, we're not going to be able to make functional thyroid hormones. So iodide comes through our diet. We get it from our salt, right? Our government has ensured that our salts have iodide in them. Along with the salt, we can also see iodide in shellfish, I believe it is as well. So here, iodide comes in, and iodide is going to get picked up, and it is actively transported, right? Active transport, you should remember from biology. You've gone through active transport, and you've seen that, so that's exactly what they're talking about here. Iodide gets actively transported, now you can see, into those thyroid follicle cells. Now within the cell, then you can see iodide now move over to the opposite side. Moves over to the opposite side where it can exit now out of the cell and make its way then into the center of the follicle, where the colloid is at. Now here, as iodide passes through, iodide, you can see here now, becomes oxidized. When it becomes oxidized, it gives rise to iodine. Now, at the same time, here we have thyroglobulin being synthesized. Thyroglobulin, protein synthesis, right? You've seen all that. You should know this whole process through the rough ER, the Golgi apparatus, and then it gets packaged for basically modified, packaged, and exocytosed. So here you could see thyroglobulin making its way out. Now thyroglobulin, after having undergone all these different processes, thyroglobulin becomes tyrosine. So tyrosines are part of the thyroglobulin molecule. Now these tyrosine molecules that we have created are able to attach with iodine. Now when these molecules all start coming together, they form for us DIT, or di, because of two, diiodothyronine. And here we have monoiodothyronine. So the difference, one iodine atom attached to the tyrosines. So here then you can see now when we get two DITs and we put them together, then we form T4. If we get a DIT and one MIT and put them together, we have T3. So you can see the difference between T3 and T4, one molecule of iodine. Now T3 and T4 are going to get endocytosed. You can see here they make their way into the cell. And then from here, they're going to encounter lysosomes within the cell. Lysosomes now are going to basically come in and cleave T3 and T4. Once they come in and cleave T3 and T4, you can see here now, at the opposite end of the cell now, we've got functional, basically thyroid hormones here. These thyroid hormones now are going to make their way into the bloodstream. And like we said, the rest is history. So here we talk about increasing basal metabolic rate. We're talking increasing your metabolism, right? When we talk metabolism, what are we talking about? We're talking about all the various chemical reactions that are taking place within our bodies. All the chemical reactions taking place within the body. So increasing basal metabolic rate. Second, then we said body heat production. If you look at the two go hand in hand. Whenever we start having more chemical reactions take place, what's one byproduct of the chemical reaction? Heat production. So heat production, you can see, is going to occur. Now, too much thyroid hormone, we have increased metabolism. So what's going to happen to the patient's size? Their patient will look a little bit overweight. Okay, but does that always stick with this hyperthyroidism here? No, because what's going to happen is once this patient's metabolism increases, this is going to cause them to become hungrier. Okay, so let me go back. So hyper, if we have too much thyroid hormone, we're going to have more chemical reactions taking place within the body. So if we have hyperthyroidism, too much thyroid hormone, and normally speaking, thyroid hormone is going to basically increases metabolism. So if you have too much thyroid hormone, what's going to happen? This person's metabolism is going to be increased. So when this metabolism increases, this is going to cause their figure to become thinner. They'll be skinnier. With too much thyroid hormone, this will cause their metabolism to increase. With the metabolism increase, it's going to cause all the chemical reactions to occur faster, and it's going to cause their body frame to look a bit thinner. But like I said, that's not always going to be the case. The reason why is because now with an increased metabolism, you're going to tend to eat more as well. So now when you eat more, what's that going to do? It's going to indirectly increase that weight on the body. So we can't say every single patient that has hyperthyroidism is going to be skinny. No, that's not the case always. So body heat production, so how are they going to feel? They will be feeling hot all the time. These are people who are sitting there turning the AC on in like the winter. Maintains blood pressure. So you should be able to go through and understand basically what is happening when you have too much, and also if you don't have enough thyroid hormone. So in hyper and hypo, you should be able to figure out there as well. Next then are the parafollicular cells. So when we talk parafollicular cells, here you can appreciate those parafollicular cells. These parafollicular cells, they are also known as the C cells, as we could see there, of that thyroid gland. And their job is to produce calcitonin. Calcitonin is a polypeptide hormone. It's a polypeptide hormone. Calcitonin is going to target the skeleton. Targets the skeleton, and it has a bone sparing effect on the skeleton. When I say it has a bone sparing effect, because its job is to lower your blood calcium levels. Lowers your blood calcium levels, antagonizing the effect of parathyroid hormone. Next then here we've got parathyroid glands. Now we talk about our parathyroid glands. They are tiny, yellow to brown glands. So here you can see all the, when I was telling you target organs, target cells, you've got to be able to go through all of these different systems here and understand how this hormone is going to be affecting those systems. So you can see thyroid hormone has got a very important job in our bodies. Before we jump onto those glands here, I want to mention to you guys a couple of conditions. Parathyroid glands here, I forgot to mention goiter. This young man here on the left-hand side has a goiter. Goiter can happen from hyper or hypothyroidism. And then here we can see this young lady here has exophthalmos, where you have the protruding of the eyes from basically their sockets. And this is usually due to too much protein deposition towards in the back of the eye, and it causes the eyes to have that appearance there, exophthalmos. And it's quite common in patients with Graves' disease as well. So here are the parathyroid glands. You can appreciate those glands there. And like we said, parathyroid glands, usually 4. However, the quantity can vary. Anywhere from 2 to 4, we can have 3 to 4. But 4 is usually what we see average. The location of these basically glands, these glands are going to be found on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. Found on the posterior aspect of the thyroid gland. Yep, one time, there was a time where we didn't even know that they existed there. So here when we go through, we talk about the parathyroid glands. Here now is what they'll look like macroscopically, but then we throw them under the microscope. We've got a nice image here depicting both for you. So here under the microscope, we can appreciate those glands. Now when we throw them under the microscope, first cell here that we have is the chief cells. The chief cells are very numerous in quantity. They are numerous in quantity, and they are small. They're small cells, and they secrete PTH. They are very small cells, and they secrete PTH. PTH, or parathyroid hormone. It is also known as parathormone. Parathormone. Now, when we talk about parathyroid hormone, its target organs are going to include, number 1, we can see here, we've got the skeleton. Number 2, kidneys, and number 3, the intestines. So here at the level of the skeleton, what it's going to do is it's going to stimulate osteoclasts. And what osteoclasts are going to do is they're going to break down bone. So when we break down bone, this increases the levels of calcium and phosphates into the blood. So the function of parathyroid hormone is the opposite of what we saw with calcitonin. Calcitonin removed this excess calcium from the blood and deposited it into the bone. Here we're low in calcium and we're going to remove it from the bone. So once the bone gets broken down because of the osteoclast, this helps to release the calcium into the blood. Then we talk kidneys. Kidneys, PTH makes its way over to the kidneys as well. PTH is going to act on the kidneys by increasing calcium reabsorption, right, from those kidneys tubules. ADH, I think we have to go back and remember ADH. I told you guys to know where ADH works at as well. ADH is going to work, so we can't just say kidney, 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 right? You're going to start knowing the kidneys themselves are made up of a certain part, the nephron that we talked about in the beginning, the first day of class. A lot of you guys weren't familiar with that. Even those of you coming from Bio 107, so you got to make sure you're familiar with that nephron. It's a very important structure in relation to that kidney. So when we talked ADH, ADH was going to work at the distal convoluted tubule and the collecting ducts. Now here when we talk PTH, PTH you'll see now is going to be working on the loop of Henle. It works on the loop of Henle. And what does PTH do? PTH is going to increase calcium's reabsorption by the kidneys tubules, or in those kidneys tubules. So PTH makes its way over to the kidneys. It makes its way over to the loop of Henle, specifically speaking. Even more specifically speaking, you're going to have to know there's a couple of different parts in the loop of Henle and where exactly it's at. And here again, it's going to increase calcium reabsorption. So if PTH isn't in the picture, what the kidney would do is it would remove any excess calcium that it doesn't need. But however, when PTH comes into the picture, that's going to be telling us, hey, we need to absorb more calcium, and so that's what the kidneys will do, instead of dumping it out in the urine. Third, then here we can see the intestines. Now, how does this work? Here, PTH is going to promote the kidneys' activation of vitamin D. Now, which then increases the calcium absorption from our food. So here you have an indirect action taking place. So the function of PTH is to increase calcium levels, in the blood, to increase calcium levels in the blood. Next then are the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands. Adrenal glands are found as a pair. They are pyramid-shaped glands, and they are enclosed in a fibrous capsule. Along with that fibrous capsule, they're going to be protected or cushioned by fat. So first they have a capsule surrounding them, and then surrounding that capsule is going to be fat. It's going to be adipose. Here you can appreciate that now very nicely. You've got the capsule, and then we've got the rest of that gland. We'll go through and we'll check out. So when we talk about this adrenal gland, the adrenal glands found as a pair, as we said. So right and a left adrenal gland, they're pyramid shaped, and they're going to be found located on top of each kidney, on top of each of the kidneys. So suprarenal glands, they are also known as. Now the target organs, when we talk about the target organs, now here we're getting into the adrenal cortex. So the cortex of the adrenal gland. Now we're going to see the hormones that are going to be released from here. Where are they going to go and target? So when we go through, we talk about the zona glomerulosa. The zona glomerulosa is one of the three divisions of that cortex. So the cortex gets divided up into three parts. You can see that here very well. You've got the zona glomerulosa, zona fasciculata, and then here we've got the zona reticularis. So all three of those divisions make up the cortex, and then internal to that cortex we've got the medulla. Then we have the medulla. Now when we go through and we talk, let's talk first zona glomerulosa. When we talk zona glomerulosa, the zona glomerulosa is going to be the most superficial layer of all the layers. You can see it's right at the border with the capsule. So when we talk zona glomerulosa, it's the most superficial layer, and this zona is important because it's going to be producing mineral corticoids. It produces mineral corticoids. Mineral corticoids now, their function is to regulate electrolyte concentration. And then the most important mineral corticoid that you'll be responsible for knowing about is going to be good old aldosterone. Aldosterone. I like to call Big Al. Aldosterone is very important. So what does aldosterone do? It regulates electrolyte concentration. Aldosterone is going to target the kidneys. Again, we're saying kidneys. More specifically speaking, it will be, you'll see the distal tubules. It will be the distal tubules. Now, when we go through and we talk aldosterone, its function is to increase blood levels of sodium. So here when we talk aldosterone, it's important we mention and we talk about the Ross system. When we talk about the Ross system is a system we have in the body. It's made up of various components that are going to help maintain blood pressure. So now the Ross system, here what happens is if you have low, let's see here. Okay, so let me see, can I go here? Maybe right here would be better. So here we could see, now we've got the kidneys and we have the adrenal glands. Now if for some reason in our bodies our sodium level was to come down, right? Or our water volume is low, our water pressure is low inside the body. Here what's going to happen is we've got this one, basically you'll see this one hormone making its way from the kidneys. Here we're going to see now, we've got renin, we're going to go through and we're going to talk about. That's this whole name of this whole system. This is the Ross system, R-A-A-S. I wish this was a little bit better for the writing. So renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system is what we're looking at. So here now, if you have these two signals appear, what's going to happen is now this will basically activate renin. Renin, what it does, it's going to convert angiotensinogen. It will convert angiotensinogen, we'll put an AG there, into angiotensin 1. It will convert. So if sodium levels fall or water pressure goes down, renin will come in and it will activate. It'll activate angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. Angiotensin 1 then gets converted to angiotensin 2. Thanks to, we'll see, ACE. ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. So what's it going to do? Like the name says, angiotensin converting enzyme. It's going to convert angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. ACE converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. ACE stands for angiotensin converting enzyme. ACE comes from the endothelium of your lungs. Comes from the endothelium of your lungs. You got to know what endothelium is. We discussed that about 2 months ago. So ACE comes in, it converts angiotensin 1 to angiotensin 2. Angiotensin 2 then is going to make its way over to the zona glomerulosa, where it will then stimulate the release of aldosterone, right? Big Al, we said. And what does aldosterone do? Aldosterone then is going to make its way over to the kidneys, we said. And exactly. So here, aldosterone comes into the picture. And aldosterone, we said, is going to be responsible for increasing blood levels of sodium. So here, it makes its way over to the kidneys, I told you. When it makes its way over to the kidneys, it's going to help increase that reabsorption of sodium. So when sodium comes in now, the kidneys pick up sodium. Guess what follows sodium? Water. Very good. Water. So here now, with aldosterone coming into the picture, what does aldosterone do? Increases our sodium. Look at the original signal. Okay, and it increases. With sodium goes water. Then we increase that water intake. What's this doing to our blood pressure? All of this is going to increase your blood pressure. That's why you got to know this. For blood pressure. Your Ross system. Next thing we have the zona fasciculata. The zona fasciculata. Now when we go through and we talk zona fasciculata, that's going to be the layer right after then, this zona we saw here now, the zona glomerulosa. And when we talk zona fasciculata is found just deep to the zona glomerulosa. When we talk zona fasciculata, the zona fasciculata is a second layer, so we can say there, the zona fasciculata now is going to be responsible for manufacturing and releasing an important glucocorticoid that you'll have to know about. The important glucocorticoid that you have to know about is going to be cortisol. Now, when we talk about cortisol, cortisol's target organs are most body cells. Its function is to influence the energy metabolism. It's to influence our energy metabolism and also help us to resist stressors. And to help us resist stressors, and how will it do that? By increasing glucose levels. Right? You're stressed out. One thing we need, glucose. Why? What is glucose going to do for us? Very good. You know my two favorite words. Cellular respiration. So here when we go through and we talk adrenal glands and after the zona fasciculata, right? So you have to be able to talk about that during stress and get that zona fasciculata taken care of there. So next then after zona fasciculata, then we've got zona reticularis, this third layer. And then when we talk zona reticularis, the zona reticularis is going to be important because it's going to release hormones here as well. It's the deepest layer of the three. And now when we talk zona reticularis, the zona reticularis produces a small amount of adrenal sex hormones. It produces a small amount of adrenal sex hormones. So one way to remember this gland is the deeper it gets, the sweeter it gets. I usually joke with my students and I tell them that. The deeper it gets, the sweeter it gets, right? You start off with salt, glucose, and then sex hormones. Yeah, I don't know. It's something nobody ever forgets. I was taught that in school, and it's in most of our books as mnemonics, and you'll be able to see that there as well. So that takes care of then our zona reticularis. Next then let's move into the medulla from the cortex then. So let's move into the medulla from the cortex. Now we talk medulla. Medulla is the most deepest part. The medulla is more like a knot of the nervous system than a gland. It's also a part of, you'll see, the sympathetic system. And the reason why is because we're going to see produced and released here are catecholamines. Catecholamines. And catecholamines, you'll have to know about, are going to include epinephrine and norepinephrine. And catecholamines, their function or their target organs is going to be the same target organs as the sympathetic nervous system. The same target organs as the sympathetic nervous system because it's going to have the same effects. So if you understood sympathetic nervous system, we went through all the different functions, we talked about that. That's exactly what you're relating this to now. Bronchodilation, right? Pupillary dilation. Okay, we went through and we talked about all of that there as well. So adrenal, medulla. That then, so when we talk functions again, functions of catecholamines, it's going to mimic your sympathetic activation. It's important you understand that. Right? Increasing heart rate there as well, so we can keep going on and on. Next one, let's move to the pancreas. Let's discuss the pancreas. Now when we talk pancreas, here, before we jump off to pancreas, here we could see some of these cortical hormones. You've got these tables here giving you basically the idea of what's happening there. And the same thing happening, you can see here. And then here we have some other organs that are going to be responsible for producing some hormones. You'll have to know those, and we'll go through those. We'll check, basically, you'll be able to go through and check those out there on your own as well. But I have a list for you. I'll go through those, and I'll mention those for you guys at the end. Next, then we have the pancreas. So when we talk pancreas, pancreas is going to be... All right, so let's continue with our pancreas. Excuse the hat. I went to the gym, took a shower, didn't feel like, you know. All right, so like I was saying, sorry, I went to the gym, didn't feel like doing my hair and stuff, so bear with the hat. All right, so let's talk pancreas then. Now, when we talk pancreas, here we're talking about a very soft, triangular, mixed gland, a triangular shaped mixed gland when we talk pancreas. Now, what we'll do is we'll move over to this image here where you can actually see the pancreas in its entirety, but let's actually move back to the original picture of all the endocrine glands, and let's look at the pancreas here in relation to then all the other organs. So here you can see it better. The reason why I say better, because here you can see you've got the small intestine there as well, and you're able to appreciate the small intestine, so the digestive structures are in there as well. And here the stomach would basically be found right in here. If I was to actually, let's continue that, let's draw it in. So if I was to draw it in, you would have something kind of like this coming up into here, and then making its way around like this, kind of something like that, coming around like this, and then making its way up. You've got like, not exactly, but so what we could do best with here. So you would have the stomach there. Now you can appreciate that, the small intestine and then the pancreas. So moving back, it's a small, soft, triangular, shaped mixed gland. Now when we talk pancreas, pancreas is going to be a special gland. The reason why the pancreas is a special gland, because the pancreas is considered to be a mixed gland. Now when we say that the pancreas is considered to be a mixed gland, here now we're going back to the point we were making in the beginning. We were talking about endocrine and exocrine glands. So this is where you'll see that's going to come into play. Next in here, when we move through, here we're going to be able to see the location. So when we talk location now, you can see it's found in the abdomen, partly behind the stomach. So in the abdomen, partly behind the stomach. And you can see that here, it's found right next to that small intestine. And more specifically speaking, we can say it's found right next to the duodenum. This is the duodenum of that small intestine. So getting more specific, you can see this is the duodenum. It's going to be found in relation to that duodenum. Close proximity to the duodenum. Sometimes what happens is this pancreas grows extra tissue right here on the outside as well. And that tissue basically you can think of in circles. So with that extra tissue being grown there, it encircles that duodenum and it can cause it to be blocked as well. And they refer to that as annular pancreas, annular pancreas. So here then moving down, then here we're going to be able to go back and see now when we talk pancreas, so that's the pancreas macroscopically. Microscopically is what you're seeing right on the right. But in order to appreciate that, what we'll do is we'll move over to this image here where you could see it microscopically much better. So now microscopically speaking is what we want to talk about. Here what we see, again, we're going to be talking endocrine because that's all we're talking about right now. And we'll talk digestive, we'll go through the exocrine component. Okay? So here when we go through, we talk pancreas, it's got these pancreatic islets you see there. A whole bunch of pancreatic islets. And these pancreatic islets, they're tiny cell clusters. They are tiny cell clusters, and you say, what type of cells? We're going to go through those types of cells there as well. So they're tiny cell clusters that are going to produce pancreatic hormone. That will be responsible for producing pancreatic hormones. Now, let's go through the different cell types. You have two main cell populations here. You have alpha cells and you have beta cells. Alpha cells and beta cells. First, we talk alpha cells. Our alpha cells are going to be responsible for producing glucagon, as we can see here. They are our glucagon producing cells. Now, the target organ for glucagon is going to be, we'll see the liver. The reason why is because it's going to promote, at the level of the liver, it's going to promote glycogenolysis. Glycogenolysis. Where we're going to break down glycogen. So glycogenolysis, and when we break down glycogen, this forms for us new glucose. So that process is called gluconeogenesis. Right, just break down each of those words and you've got everything figured out there. So it'll target the liver, where it's going to promote glycogenolysis, where you break down glycogen. Glycogen, we all learned in bio, right, is the storage form of glucose. And where do we find it stored? You see how it all makes sense now. Now, when we go through and we talk functions, so the function of glucagon is to release glucose into the blood. So glucagon is going to release glucose into the blood by breaking down that glycogen. Next then are the beta cells. Beta cells. Beta cells are going to be responsible for producing insulin. Insulin. Now the beta cells produce insulin. The insulin is going to target most body organs. It will target most body organs. And the main function here that I'd like you to know about is going to be that it's going to lower blood glucose levels. It will lower blood glucose levels. It's also going to influence protein and fat metabolism. It will also influence protein and fat metabolism. Insulin is very important in neuronal development. It's also involved in our feeding behaviors. Also in learning and memory. So very, very important. Main function you're going to be seeing it for and you're going to be using is going to be lowering blood glucose levels. Right? Patients' glucose levels are too elevated. Their body doesn't do what it needs to do. We call in them the big guns. Next, let's move to the gonads. Let's talk gonads. Now, when we talk gonads, we're talking testes or ovaries, depending on which sex we're talking about. So here first, let's talk gonads. Gonads are, let's talk ovaries first. I'm sorry, the female gonads. When we talk female gonads, the ovaries, they're found as a pair. They're going to be found as a pair. There are two of them. They're found as a pair. They're going to be found located in the female's abdominal pelvic cavity. So the ovaries are found as a pair. They're small oval organs. Small oval organs found in the female's abdominal pelvic cavity. Now, they're going to be responsible for, basically, you'll see producing and releasing estrogen. They'll be responsible for producing and releasing estrogen. So here when we go through and we talk estrogen in relation to the female gonads, I want you guys to know the target organ that estrogen is going to target now when it gets released from basically the ovaries. It will target the female reproductive organs. And its function is that it's responsible for the maturation of the reproductive organs. It's responsible for the maturation of the reproductive organs and also for the appearance of secondary sex characteristics of females at puberty. So it's responsible for the maturation of the female reproductive organs and the appearance of the secondary sex characteristics in females at puberty. So when we talk secondary sex characteristics, we're talking enlargement of the genitalia, the appearance of pubic hair, basically. That's what we talk when we get into appearance of secondary sex characteristics. Next then, we've got progesterone. Next hormone here, in relation to the ovaries, we've got progesterone. We talk progesterone. Progesterone, you'll see, is going to target also the female's reproductive organs. And its function is that it promotes breast development. It will promote breast development. And also it's involved in the cyclic changes in the menstrual cycle. It's also involved in the cyclic changes in the menstrual cycle. Progesterone's involved in pregnancy. It supports gestation. It's involved with pregnancy and supports gestation. And it's involved in embryogenesis. And it's important in embryogenesis. Next then we've got our testes. And we talk testes. Here we can appreciate the testes in the bottom picture. And we'll look at them in greater detail when we get to each of the, when we get to the reproductive system. We talk each respective reproductive system there as well. Now we talk testes. Testes, they're going to be found located in the anterior side. They are in the anterior side of the male body in an extra-abdominal skin pouch. They are found on the anterior aspect in an extra-abdominal skin pouch that we refer to as the scrotum. So they're found in an extra-abdominal skin pouch called the scrotum. And again, we'll talk about that in greater detail when we get to male reproductive. So let's talk then testosterone here. Testosterone. Testosterone is going to target male reproductive organs. And we talk testosterone. Testosterone, I want you to know during puberty. During puberty here, now it's going to initiate maturation of the male reproductive organs. Here it's going to be involved in the appearance of the male's secondary sex characteristics. So testosterone during puberty initiates maturation of the male reproductive organs and the appearance of secondary sex characteristics in the male as well. And the appearance of so involved in the appearance of secondary sex characteristics. During puberty it initiates the maturation of the male reproductive organs. And it's involved with, we spoke about earlier, normal sperm production as well. Next then, let's talk pineal gland. Let's talk pineal gland. Now when we talk pineal gland, this pineal gland is going to be found as a part of the epiphyses. We talked thalamus, hypothalamus, and epithalamus. It's going to be a part of the epithalamus. Pineal gland is also known as the epiphyses cerebri. So at the roof, you can see of the third ventricle where we saw the epithalamus. Even the posterior end of the corpus callosum, if you recall. Now the secretion peaks from age basically 1 to 5 years of age. And this gland then shrinks by about 75% at puberty. So when we go through and we talk about this gland is a tiny pine cone shaped gland. So location we've gone through, we've just mentioned. And it secretes melatonin. And the target organs for melatonin, you'll see, is going to be basically different parts of the body. So let's talk function. Now, when we talk function, the function is not fully clear. However, we believe that melatonin is going to function as a very powerful antioxidant. It functions as a very powerful antioxidant. And that melatonin is going to be involved in our circadian rhythms. It's involved in our circadian rhythms. So basically, what happens is it receives signals from our visual pathway about dark and light cues. So then it's involved in basically sleep, we could say there. And it's also involved in our mood as well. So it plays a role in our moods. Next in here we have the thymus. We talk thymus. Thymus is large and conspicuous. And then it diminishes in adulthood. So it's large and conspicuous. And then it diminishes in adulthood. And it gets replaced by fat and basically fibrous connective tissue. It gets replaced by fat and fibrous connective tissue. Now, when we go through and we talk about the thymus is going to be found located deep to the sternum. So it's found located deep to the sternum, in the thorax, on top of the heart, and in between the lungs. Now, when we talk about the thymus, I'd like you to know about thymosins, thymopoietin, and thymulin. Now, these hormones, they're going to be involved in the normal development. They're involved in the normal development of lymphatic organs and T cells, our T lymphocytes. Our T lymphocytes actually come to the thymus to mature, we say. It's kind of like the thymus is high school for our T lymphocytes. High school for our T lymphocytes. Next then here, I've got a list at the end of your note taker of other hormone producing organs. So I'd like you to go through each of those from your note taker and make sure you've got the hormones found in relation to them understood as well. So you got the hypothalamus, you got the heart, the GI tract, placenta, kidneys, skin, adipose, and skeleton. So go through them as well and get those checked off.